Hey guys, this is Jeff Stanek with Figured Out Baseball. Got a really good Figured Out Baseball podcast today that I'm excited for. We've got Edwin Thompson today on the phone with us. He's the head coach at Eastern Kentucky, a Division I school in the Ohio Valley Conference, which is a conference that I used to coach in, so I've got some familiarity there, although he was hired after I left. I'll give you a quick background on Coach Thompson before we jump into questions with him. He's a native of Maine. He played collegiately at Howard University, a Division I school in Washington, D.C. before they dropped baseball while he was there. Then he transferred to the University of Maryland and finished his career at Weber International University, an NAIA school in Florida. He played one season of independent baseball after he was done collegiately. He started his coaching career in college from 2005 to 2008 as the associate head coach and recruiting coordinator at the University of Maine at Farmington, a Division III school obviously in Maine. From 2009 and 10, he was the head coach at Bates College, a Division III school in Lewiston, Maine. From there, he was hired to be the recruiting coordinator at Duke in North Carolina, obviously part of the ACC. His 2012 class at Duke was ranked by Baseball America as one of the top recruiting classes in the South and was ranked by Perfect Game's top 35. From 2013 through 15, he was an assistant coach at Georgia State. He was the pitching coach for the first two seasons and then transitioned to be the recruiting coordinator and defensive coordinator in 2015, his last spring there. His 2015 class at Georgia State was ranked in Perfect Game's top 100 recruiting classes. He was hired at Eastern Kentucky in July of 2015. 2016, his first spring at Eastern Kentucky, they beat two nationally ranked teams. They had a player who broke the school record for walks and home runs that year, who was a 21st round draft pick by the A's. They also had a 17th round draft pick that year by the Yankees, who led the nation in hits. In 2017, he coached an All-American who was also voted the co-conference player of the year. He was a 21st round draft pick by the Marlins in the same season as he broke the school single season record for home runs. In 2018, the team won 30 games. He had an All-American that year who finished as a finalist for the Johnny Bench Award, which is given every year to the nation's best catcher. That player was also a 15th round draft pick in 2018. Then in 2019, they won 32 games. They had 16 conference wins that year, which was the most conference wins since 2013. They had a 6th round draft pick on the mound, drafted by the Dodgers, the highest draft pick at Eastern Kentucky since 2008. That player also broke the school record for ERA with a 0.83 mark. He was voted an All-American, obviously, for those numbers that he put up. They had another player who broke the single-season record for walks. They, as a team, broke the single-season record for strikeouts. That was the third straight season the pitching staff broke the school record for strikeouts. They had the best team ERA in 2019 since 2008. 2019 was also their fourth straight season as a team where they won the ABCA's Team Academic Excellence Award. 2020, they started off really hot. They started off 12-2 before the season was cut short. Overall, Coach Thompson has coached more than 20 players who have been voted All-Americans. He's coached 42 players who have moved on to play professionally. And in his time at Eastern Kentucky, they have beat 5 nationally ranked teams, which is always impressive for a mid-major who doesn't get to play nationally ranked teams a lot. You don't usually have a lot of nationally ranked teams in the conference. So very impressive. Coach Thompson, I really appreciate you being on the podcast with us today.
Hey, Jeff. I appreciate you having me on, and excited to talk some baseball today. So thanks for that introduction. And obviously, I have a lot of great players and great coaches that make that sound a lot better than really what it is. So I appreciate that welcoming.
We all appreciate the humbleness, and it's genuine with Coach Thompson. If you haven't met him before, it's all genuine. That's one of the reasons I was excited to get you on a podcast. Coach Thompson, I usually like to start with something from the bio that sticks out, and for you, this is always something that I'm very interested in. Moving from being a Division III head coach to being an assistant coach in the ACC, and then a couple years later, you're hired as a Division I head coach. I know you had another stop in the middle there, but can you kind of tell us how that happened? I know there are, a job opens up at a place like Duke, and I'm sure there are hundreds upon hundreds of resumes pouring in there. Can you kind of talk us through what happened there and just how you separated yourself and how you ended up getting the job at Duke, which I'm sure that you would say kind of changed the trajectory of your college coaching career?
It is a very interesting path. And prior to my time at Bates, I was a middle school track coach. Was my last job that I had before I got the Bates job, as well as coaching college baseball, and I coached high school basketball and high school football. So for 4 years, I was at University of Maine at Farmington. I kind of just coached them whatever I could, any free time I had. And then when I got to Bates, it was a head coaching job. But I was recruiting an academic kid. And so I started working camps at academic schools and then just talking to the division coaches of where they're going to go to. And so that's kind of was my thing. I just followed those guys around to different events and different things that happened. And fortunately, there was a head first camp that I went to, and I met the Duke coach, just happened to be recruiting at the same field, different players, but the same field, and had mentioned that they have a camp and they're looking for some counselors. And so, I was like, sure, there's academic kids there. So I went down to work at camp. This is before the job was open or anything of that nature. So I went down and worked at camp for the week. Like most times, you're excited to get some kids, meet some new people, and hopefully, learn a little bit along the way. About a week or two later, the head coach called me and he said, "Hey, would I be interested in the job?" Sean McNally, and he basically was like, I enjoyed our conversations when I was down there, and it was the first time I met. So I kind of had a whole week of an interview process, even though I didn't know that I was getting interviewed, and so that's kind of how it worked. And I think one thing that separated me, the camp was going on. We had a camp schedule, and the Duke staff happened to have some meetings going on that took them over the start time. And so I just took it upon myself to start running the camp, stretching and the throwing, or whatever it was on the schedule. And they came out and they were kind of impressed the fact that I just took that initiative to just make sure that 100 kids were organized and kind of keeping things rolling. So I think that stood out. And then I think just my unique story coming from Maine, being a Division III coach and how that would be different in the ACC. I think those things set me apart, and I think now at that interview process, I think the plan that I had from a recruiting standpoint, how we're going to recruit, obviously helped. But yeah, I've never had a Division I experience as a coach, and so the coach basically asked me, "Why should I hire me?" And I said, "Well, I'm pretty confident in what I do and how I do it without being cocky." I think he just gave me a great opportunity, and I'm always grateful for him and for that chance at Duke.
I think that, from now, I've never been to that level, but from my perspective, when guys get a job like that, they get a job in a major conference, it can really it helps a lot, when you're trying to move on and get the next job and eventually get a head coaching job. But I would like to ask just about even the head coaching position at Eastern Kentucky. This is just, again, something I'd like to talk about, and you and I have talked about this before we started recording, but just the interview process, how you get jobs, how you move up from place to place. Did you ever get any indication of what separated you from other candidates for this head coaching job at Eastern Kentucky, or have any idea, what exactly it was that made the committee decide to hire you?
So I think the biggest thing that I took from that experience when I was at Duke and I was at Georgia State, it allowed me to have I also interviewed for a couple of head jobs prior to this. So I was finalist for 2 or 3 of them, but I didn't get the job. But I took that information and I really worked on just my presentation to make sure everything was sharp. And I think going to Eastern Kentucky, I felt that I was ready. And then growing up in Maine, we grew up with cold weather, short season, not many resources for, especially at the Division III level when I first started coaching. And so at Eastern Kentucky, we didn't have a ton of all the bells and whistles, let's just say. It was a humbling job in the sense that it was Division I, but at the same time, it needed some work. And I think some coaches would make excuses about certain things. And I think for me, I've always been one to focus on what I have and what I don't have. And so it was all perspective. And I think at Georgia State, we had to travel off campus to go to our field. At Duke, we had a campus on campus, but we also had to travel off campus to travel. Everywhere I've gone, I have always had something we had to do. And EKU, the field was right on campus. My office was right in the basketball arena. I could look outside and I could walk across the street or the parking lot. And so I was so excited about that. And the AD was like, "What about the facilities?" I'm like, "Well, it's everything that we need. We have lights, we have turf, we have field. It's great. Stands may need some work, and some dugouts may need to be painted, but So I think that openness that was like, hey, this is a dream job, really, and that's how I approached it, because it was an opportunity to be one of 300 Division I head coaches, and I think that really allowed me to have the a little bit of an in, if you will, through the process, and then I think over time, then it kind of worked itself out to rise up to get the job.
Now, with you, when you're hiring assistant coaches, I know you've had to hire quite a few of them, and you've been through the process, and you've had it, I'm sure, at Bates as well. Bates and Eastern Kentucky, you've had to hire people. Well, I assume you did at Bates. I guess I don't know that for sure. But when you're going through candidates, you're flipping through candidates, I'm sure you get a ton of resumes, and probably a lot of them are easy to throw out just for one reason or another. When you're sort of narrowing things down, let's just start with resumes, looking at resumes and deciding, like, okay, these are some people that I'm going to sort of I'm going to lock in on, and they seem like good candidates. What are some things you like to see on resumes, if there's anything in particular?
Well, I think, honestly, what I've learned through the process of hiring people is you have a list of people that you want to work with, and you have that list. Every coach should have a list of people they want to hire. So you start with those people first, and then fortunately, with social media, or for good or bad, it sometimes will get out sooner than you want it to, as far as the person leaving for that job. And then you kind of get, a lot of phone messages, text messages, emails, and then you kind of filter through that. But when I actually get an email, a resume, and I just have to go through it and just see if their skill set initially, fits what I'm looking for, whether it be by positional coach or just their overall experience. But at the same time, having been a Division III coach, having been a high school coach, I don't get caught up into where they've coached. I've really tried to limit that, because I think you can get caught up in, the guy coached at this school and that guy, such a big school, or played professionally, or whatever. To me, it's about the substance of the person. So once I initially go through all that process with the resumes and see what, if they have some sort of experience, if it's a job that I'm, hiring. And then it comes down to, getting to know that person, talking to them on the phone, talking to their references, I'll even call their former players and kind of get a sense of how that person, how that coach interacts with adversity, and things of that nature. So it's just it's a combination of things. You have your list, you have some friends that may reach out and pass along information, and try to filter through that, and then try to get down to the person, a couple, 3, 4 people that I think are the best fit, and then kind of go from there, and then hopefully get the right candidate.
Do camps still work as networking opportunities for guys like it did for you? Is that something that still happens the way that the way that the game is now, or the way that camps are run? Like, is that, when you guys hold camps, do you, as sort of a secondary focus, try to get to know the people that are working and think, like, do I have a possible future hiring candidate here? Is that still something that happens in today's game?
Yeah, it is. My first year, my volunteer that I hired, Eric Smith, is now the recruiting coordinator at Youngstown State. I hired him because we connected at a camp. My third, and I think our fourth or so volunteer or assistant coach we've had, based off through camps. And so I think the networking that goes on at camps is so critical, especially for young coaches. I try to hire young coaches at my camps, and I watch them, and I watch how they work, and I watch how they go about their business. And so that the model has changed a little bit, because it's not as many. There's more just tournaments and games and things. So I think that part's been hurt our game a little bit, especially over the winter time. There's not as many of those old. You can have tons of winter camps, and I think those things are were great as an assistant. So I think there's definitely things have changed, but there's still opportunity. I think every camp you go to, there's an opportunity to meet somebody new, to recruit somebody different. But again, it has to come down to that individual that wants that. Some coach will just go to the camp and have no idea, what they're looking for. I actually interviewed one guy who we met as an assistant together, and then 2 years later, I actually called him to get a job. And then other coaches that I saw at that same camp, I saw how they worked, and I was like, you know what, it's not going to work out for you, because I saw how you work when nobody's watching, so to speak, even though I was watching. So I always kind of keep an eye on those type of things, but I think it's definitely important to network and have those opportunities for camps, for sure.
If you're watching how guys work at camps, what impresses you when you're watching a young guy work?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is his professionalism. Are they going to be at that camp with an intent to recruit the players, to help the players? Are they engaged with the players? I think coming up for me when I was a younger coach in the sense of just years, I valued those camps because I felt that it was an opportunity to coach maybe, especially as a Division III coach, maybe some Division I players that were, maybe I can recruit them, maybe I can't, but at least I can, put myself in that situation to coach them at some point. That was always my goal. But at the same time, I was engaged with the kids. I really took I always told my mentor to take notes on every single kid, because you'll never know what kid is going to end up where and where you're going to end up, in a job, or who may get hired. I got hired at Duke, but I had a list of names of Division I players that Duke was recruiting or that I was already recruiting, and it kind of blended in. And I had a long list of kids that I would circle. I'd be like Division I, or I kind of filter in. And so I think those type of little things that young coaches don't always know, but it's important because you never know who's watching or who runs the camp. I can call that person and I'll say, hey, how's this person work for you? And they'll say, yeah, he was kind of lazy, kind of just not really paying attention, just kind of hang out in the bucket. And so I think those guys, they go to camp for other reasons, which is fine. They make money, and that's fine. But I always took it upon myself to try to learn and get better, and then just network, because I was, coming from Maine and I want to meet new people. So it's kind of exciting from that standpoint.
Pro ball has hired quite a few guys. It appears that they have found out, pro teams have found out about guys and kind of got coaches on their radar due to their Twitter accounts. It's a phenomenon that's kind of happened the last couple of years, and those guys, I think a lot of the early on guys are still there. They haven't been fired, so it seems like it's going okay. Is social media a place that you dig a little bit to try to find guys that are posting good content, and maybe again try to find a guy that might be a candidate, or is that something? If not, whether or not you do that, is social media something that you look at through the interview process to learn more about maybe a guy that you're talking to or someone who has applied?
I think it's both. I definitely, from the interview process, 100% will look at people's social media accounts. I'll look at what they post, what they like, what they don't like, and not necessarily, just to get a sense of them as a person. And then, I've interviewed a handful of people based off their social media, but not so much like the out in the front, more of the private folks, the ones that you kind of just are kind of what I always say, the ones doing the push-ups in the corner, not the ones that you would notice the most, but the ones that kind of just go about their business and have a good presence. And so it can be something that sometimes somebody retweets something or on my screen that on Twitter that somebody may actually matches up to what I'm looking for. Maybe it's a positional coach or whatever, but I don't necessarily go searching for the internet or for social media to go hire coaches. But sometimes they happen to come up. Maybe they make a comment, and I see them, and I'm like, oh, I don't know them, so I'll follow them and kind of see how they interact, and they don't know that I'm following them or whatever. So, but definitely as far as cross-checking what they do post, I definitely do that to help in the interview process to make sure that, hey, I'm getting the right person, and so it definitely helped in that sense.
I'm going to ask this next question to hopefully give some guidance to people that might, they might see other guys getting hired because of their social media accounts. And I think that you probably noticed this as well, but once guys started to get hired, there were guys that started posting a lot, like these are drills that I'm doing, this is what I believe, and this is my philosophy, and they'd post a lot, and then they got hired. And once those first couple guys got hired, it exploded how many people wanted to try to put stuff out there. And now you can kind of feel some underlying tones of when people are posting, like when people genuinely wanted to share information and when they appear to be trying to impress other people and maybe trying to fish for a job that might be out there.
Sure.
Do you ever look at accounts and say, this guy is clearly not posting for the right reasons? even though he's posting stuff that might be good and might be true, I'm out on him because he's sort of a self-promoter. And I'm asking that again, sir. Like, if somebody's out there and they're wanting to get a job, how do you do that? Well, I mean, can you overdo it on social media and kind of turn some head coaches off because of how much, the extent of what you're doing, or maybe the tone's not right, or whatever it may be?
Yeah, I think it's two-part. I think it's no different than recruiting. I've had many times where I've recruited players, and I've had to tell them, listen, you're posting way too much. Like, I can't even keep up. You need to calm down. Or like, you're posting stuff that's not really appropriate. Like, what are you doing? Like, what's your purpose? And I think the same thing can be said about some coaches out there. And I don't necessarily lock in on those guys. Honestly, I think it comes down to, if that's what's best for them and their families, hey, post away, because if that's the route you want to go, then that's awesome. I think at the end of the day, again, you can do what's necessary for each individual is different. I can't really tell them what they should or shouldn't do, but I know for me personally, just seeing it, it's at the end of the day, you have to you have to be able to coach, and you can post all the stuff on the world, but if you can't coach, if you can't have good communication, if you're not able to have relationships with the players, all the social media stuff and all the science and all the stuff behind the end of the day is great, but if you can't, communicate that to somebody and relate that when things are going hard through some adversity, and I think that's where, and you can cover yourself up because you can get behind the social media platform, but at least through the interview process, you're going to find, at least I have a good sense of weeding those type of people out that are just, the posters and whatnot with social media. So I think it's just a balance. I think if you're genuine about it, share. If you're just trying to get a job, then, I can't, if that's the route you want to go, but I always say be where your feet are at. If you want to get a job, go earn a job,
You mentioned a couple questions ago that a mentor suggested that you kind of go about things this way. Can I ask who the mentor was?
Yeah, Sean McNally, and Dick Meter, Greg Frady, those three guys. Dick Meter is my boss at University of Maine at Farmington. Sean McNally was my boss at Duke, who's now the special assistant to the GM with the Pirates, and then Greg Frady was a coach at Georgia State University who hired me. All three of them have been huge mentors in my life in different ways, and Coach Meter, he really taught me about professionalism. He was a basketball coach, baseball coach, but he taught me about professionalism, how to be a pro, and really allowed me to coach. And Sean McNally, he mentioned to me about just every person you see, because at Duke, it's at the time, a very small academic window that we could recruit to, but I didn't understand why I have to recruit, why I have to take notes on a kid that, he had no chance to get into school. But, there was times when I was at Georgia State, I went back to my notes at Duke of kids that, his grades may not work at Duke, but they work at Georgia State. And I recruited kids based off that. And I tell young coaches all the time that you never know. One year you may be at Division III, the next year you may be at Division I, or you can be a head coach at junior college. And so you just never know where your path's going to go. And then Coach Frady, he showed me a lot of how to be the head coach off the field, the business side of things, how to do things the right way. And so each three of those guys are kind of like my guys that have really allowed me. One, they hired me, took a chance on a young kid or a guy that didn't have the resume that looked like a typical ACC resume or a pitching coach resume, but they invested in me. And I think that's what I try to do with my staff and my coaches that I work with, is try to invest them as people. And if you can do that, those type of things will always be remembered with how I go about it.
Now, your background is mainly in pitching, correct, as a coach?
Yeah, I was a hitter in college, playing, and then I got into Division III, where you kind of thrown into everything. I ended up being a pitching coach for 4 years. When I was at Bates, I had a pitching coach, but I also was involved in everything, obviously the head coach. And then at Duke, my first year, I was involved in outfielders. I did outfielders for both years and the hitters. And then my second year, Coach McNally allowed me to do some pitching. So we had a lot of pitchers, so we'd split up the pitchers with myself and Sean Snedeker, who's now at Lamar, and we'd split the bullpens. And so we'd kind of split them. So I got a little taste of pitching there, and then at Georgia State, I was pitching coach for 2 years, and then I was a pitching coach with Team USA for the Tournament of Stars. that I had the opportunity to do. And so that part of it was in I think the 17U National Development Team as well. So there was a period of time where pitching was my thing, and then I got here at EKU, and my current pitching coach is Sean Cole, who was at University of Arizona, won a national championship there, and then before that I had Adam Everlett, so he's at University of Maine, Farmington right now. So I've had great pitching coaches for my staff, so it's allowed me to kind of get back to doing some more of the offensive side of things. And but yeah, I think I'm a baseball coach, first and foremost. So I've been fortunate to have experience in both throughout my career.
A lot of young coaches out there, and understandably so, will just want to focus on one particular area. I was a hitter in college, so I want to coach hitters. I don't know much about pitching. Do you recommend that if someone has an opportunity to coach a different position that they didn't play, they're not familiar with, do you recommend giving that a shot? Understanding that, maybe some bad things could happen there. Maybe if you don't do a good job, you could get fired. I don't know. But would you recommend that, especially if someone wants to be a head coach someday? Like, do you feel like that has helped you to get where you are, and it probably has helped you to recruit and hire people as well?
100%. Yeah, no questions. I think the same advice I talk to recruits about, or even younger parents, or parents that are asking about their younger kids, is should they play one position or should they specialize? It's like, no, you gotta play multiple sports, you gotta play multiple positions. And I think coaching baseball, if you're a true baseball coach, you want to learn to get behind. So like part of my, I have a graduate assistant program that they're considered managers, but they're required to go to every position throughout the fall and learn each position. So because that next job, after they get their graduate degree, it could be as a infield coach, and they played outfield. Well, they better be prepared to go through that interview process. So at least in our program, we try to stress to our guys to make sure you're well versed. And then at the same time, it just gives you more opportunity. There's such a demand for pitching coaches, a quality pitching coach versus an offensive coach. So if you're looking at this thing and say, well, I really want to get coaching college baseball, and I used to be a catcher, well, you know how to call a game, so be a pitching coach. And you can always go back to being a hitting coach down the road. But it's helped me, not only so much helped me, so when my pitching coach goes on the road to recruit, I'm capable to run a bullpen session. I'm capable to run the pitchers. I can call a game if I want to on the week. I can do those type of things. But at the same time, it also allows yourself to grow in areas that maybe, you learn a lot. I spent about a year before I went from, in between the 2 years at Duke, just talking to other pitching coaches, really diving into it so I can be prepared. I think that's kind of the key, is like anything, you want to be prepared to what, your next opportunity is. And having those years of experience at that high level, it's helped me recruiting now. So I can talk to a parent and say, hey, I've been a pitching coach, in the ACC or at Georgia State, and I've been a pitching coach for Team USA. And so like those type of things in a conversation, it's not just talk, it's real. I can say, here, I call pitches again, things of that nature. So it's very important, I think, to be versatile.
I love that, and I think it's a great advice, and it's something that I've seen some other guys do, make the transition from pitching coach to hitting coach or vice versa, and it seems to help a lot. Obviously, it gives you perspective on things, if nothing else, and it seems like guys, it just opens you up to a lot more jobs, really, in a lot of ways, because college baseball is tough. It's a tough industry to move around in. You only have so many openings every year. It's tough to move up, and the more things you put on your resume, the better. I'd like to just flip gears a little bit and talk about things at Eastern Kentucky are trending upward. You've increased your win totals the last couple of years and started 2020 very hot, 12-2, and things are looking like they're going in a really good direction for EKU, who was for a while was a really good team in the Ohio Valley Conference, and maybe went through some years where they fell off a little bit. Can you talk about anything in particular that's been maybe a turning point for you guys, or points of emphasis between you and the other coaches that if we're going to get this thing going in the right direction, these are things that we need to do?
Yeah, I think having seen in our conference Tennessee Tech a couple years ago, when they won and they went to the Super Regional, I think it was 2018 or 2017, I forget what it was, but I looked at their lineup, I looked at their roster, and when we first got to Eastern, we went really heavy junior college, and we kind of did that for the first couple of years in a recruiting model because we felt like, oh, we needed some players and we got to get them in, and high school kids aren't necessarily ready. But for us at our level, in our league, that wasn't the case. Like Tennessee Tech had mostly high school, 4-year high school players and a couple of junior college kids sprinkled in there. So we said, oh, let's take that model. And so we re-ramped the last 3 classes have been 80% high school, 20% junior college. So we've invested more in our current kids, develop them, and try to help them help us win. And then I think our competitive nature, so my first year, our goals were simple, just know how to compete. And we competed literally in everything we possibly could do, from bowling to off the field to playing horse, playing knockout. I mean, you name it, we try to teach you guys how to compete. And I think that was something that we instilled in our players every single year. I grew up in a football family. My dad was a Hall of Famer at Delaware State. Both my brothers played college football. I coached high school football and college football during the time when I was at Bates. I was a running backs coach for 2 years, and I did 4 years of high school football. So my mentality has always been competition. And so how do you get that competition? Sometimes with junior college players or 2-year guys, it's hard because they're going to come in and it's been 1 or 2 years. But the high school kids, you can kind of help develop that. And I think this year's team, we had the most competitive group that we had. We had competition. Obviously, those things really go hand in hand. At the end of the day, we have to have talent. So those are all things that, and depth of talent. We've had talent, but just the depth of talent, we haven't had that like we had this year. So I think those were the biggest turning points for us, is just kind of taking that change from one model to the next from a recruiting standpoint, and we're recruiting mostly high school players that really allowed us to grow as a program the last couple of years.
The competitive side of things and getting guys on the team who compete, who aren't afraid to compete. Why do you think that is so important, and why was that a point of emphasis for you? Just whether it was recruiting competitive guys or, maybe ramping up their competitiveness or whatever, maybe with all the things you said, you were kind of competing from everything from bowling to, games of knockout or whatever it was. Why was that a part of your plan for taking this team to where you wanted it to go?
I think the biggest thing I can say to that is just that in this society, and people will always label kids and say, well, they're not competitive. Well, I think as leaders, our job is to make sure that your team is your program. You can make them how you want to make them. You can create that environment to where it is competitive, and it hurts to lose. And it's okay to feel bad if you do lose. And if you lose, be a professional about it. If you win, be a professional about it. It's like those type of behaviors we instill into our players. I felt that the conversations that I had when I first got hired, a lot of our kids didn't have that mentality. A lot of our kids, when I inherited the program, were just happy to be at the Division I level, and that was their end goal. And so I think then it was recruiting a different type of caliber kid that wanted to play professionally. Whether they got there or not, at least they have that want to. And I think then you get competitive people in a room. Then you have guys that, hey, I want to win. Well, I want to be a big leaguer. I want to be a big leaguer. And so then you have the plan in place of coaches and say, okay, here's our plan. Here's what we're going to do. Work with our strength coach, get stronger, get faster, and then, hey, if you win, and then you have tangible success. Like, so we beat 5 ranked teams. Well, our program now is not scared to play anybody in the country because the history and the guys that been there and the current guys now have seen the results. When we play to our best, we win, no matter who we play. And same thing if we don't play well. And so it's never who the best team is, who plays the best. And so that type of mentality that we have in our guys, I think we've done a good job of cultivating that in our program. But and I think that comes down to just, we're not a big program. We're right in the middle of it major, but I think that gives us that little bit of an edge, especially when it comes down to competition, because and I relate things to life is no CEO is going to take it easy. No CEO is going to just hang out. If you want to be a CEO, you better bust your tail and have a plan and a vision with actions behind the words. And so those type of opportunities are for our kids to see that as well. So I try to relate life and competition and all those things kind of blend in. And then we just try to just hold them to accountable, hold them to a standard, and go out there every single day to make sure that we're doing that as coaches and as players.
Do you think that competitiveness is something that you can coach, or is that one of those things to you that, like, it's got to be there before? You might be able to get a little more out of them, but I mean, like you said, you think it's that a lot of people will say, well, this kid's not competitive. Maybe that's part of the coach's job. I mean, do you feel like you need to recruit players that have that already, or do you feel like you can recruit a really good player who maybe you can increase his competitiveness by some things that you do on your staff?
Yeah, I think it depends. I mean, I think there's some kids that if you're talented, the talent is always going to be there. Talent is always going to trump. I mean, I love Rudy in the movie, but at the end of the day, the All-Americans at Notre Dame are going to play over Rudy, and that's just the nature of athletics, and that's just the reality of it. So he was probably the most competitive person in the world, but he's not stepping on the field to help his team win, and I think that sometimes can get lost. Like, I have a hard worker, well, and he's competitive, but there's a talent issue. So the person that has talent is always going to have a chance initially. Well, then that talent, like anything, when they get to the Division I level or any college level, really, there's going to be a lot of really good players that are similar. And so then it comes down to what's a separator. And sometimes the talent will rise above it and over time. But at the end of the day, the teams and the players, I always feel that we call it our program, like, on Friday night, it's always about talent. The best team on Friday night, the best arm is 9 times out of 10 is going to win. And then Saturday is about a day of adjustments, and then Sunday is about your will to compete. And so to win a series, right, or a SUBA series, you got to win on Sundays. And so even those kids that have talent, they don't have that competitive nature. At least in our place, I've seen guys over time that have bought into everything because they're all in on what we talk about. They've seen that, they take that approach to where they're going to be competitive. Now, is it going to change them as a person? I don't know. I don't think that's always going to be the case. I think every kid individually is different. Every opportunity to teach a kid is different. But it's always easier to have a kid that's talented and really competitive. But we may not always get that type of kid. We may get the talented kid or the competitive kid that needs a little bit of polish from a baseball standpoint. But if they have that in them, it makes it a little bit easier. But I think you can do both. I really do. I'm a believer that, yeah, obviously if the kid has no competitive in his body, like not at all, then yeah, he better be able to throw 95. Like, he better be really good as a pitcher or as a hitter and whatnot. But you can take a kid up from a little bit to a little bit more just because, two things that people love is playing time and scholarship money. So if you're on scholarship or you're not playing, well, if you don't do these things, something's going to change. Either you're not going to, you're not going to play, or you're not going to be with our program. So you better figure out how to, so those internal juices that are in your body, you have to be able to come out anyway.
With playing time, since you brought that up, you have a really competitive guy in your team, say, for example, and he's not getting the playing time he wants. And most guys aren't used to that because, most guys that make it to the Division I level are probably the best player on every team they've ever been on. And even on their travel teams, they might be surrounded by some other Division I guys, but they're still, they're playing a lot. Obviously, travel ball is everybody plays a little bit. It's not quite the same as high school ball. But when it's about playing, when you're able to earn every inning of playing time, like in high school, those guys are used to being on the field constantly. What are conversations that you have with guys who are those ultra-competitive people who want to be out there and they want to be competing and they're just not there talent-wise? Because that can be very frustrating, and immediately the society that we live in, for better or worse, I don't know, probably, but maybe not better, but the society we live in now says if you're not getting what you want immediately, you need to get out of that situation. You need to change the situation you're in instead of staying where you are and kind of seeing it through. So I think a lot of people's reactions now are, okay, I'm here as a freshman. I'm not playing as a freshman, so I'm immediately looking for somewhere to transfer so that I can play. What are conversations you have with guys to sort of talk them off that ledge and give them some, hopefully some a positive mindset where you're going to be fine here if you just stick it out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it starts the recruiting process for me. It always has. I tell them, I'm always going to tell them, I'm going to hold them accountable. I'm going to make sure that they're doing the basic things in our program, which is competitive, passionate, and that I can trust them. And then I tell their parents that here's the reality of what it's going to look like and what's expected and the standards. And then it comes down to, if you're not playing, I'm going to I'm going to sit you down, and if you want, I'll tell you exactly what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. And that sometimes is a little bit dicey in the recruiting process, because I'm like really honest and open about that, and I tell them, if you don't want that, don't come here, because it's not going to work out for you. Because if you're not playing, I'm going to tell you exactly why you're not playing and how to get better. And then it's on you to take that information and go do something different with it. And there's always that occasion where the kid's competitive, that's not talented there. But those competitive kids that want to get better and that really want to play, instead of just saying, make those excuses like, oh well, I'm not playing, so I'm just going to go leave. And then I'll ask them outright. I'll say, okay, you have a job, you didn't get the promotion, you're just going to not work. You're just going to work. You're going to be, basically be happy to be, there and not try to get better. And then that kind of clicks a little different, especially as they get older, a little bit different on their mindset, their thought process. But it's an important skill. I mean, I think if you don't have that understanding, like, hey, what I need to do to improve my situation, then you're missing an opportunity to get better. And I think that's the part that I try to stress to our guys is there's only 9 guys can play, 27 guys can travel, and I go through it every year. It's the same conversation. I say, hey, there's 35 guys on our roster, there's 27 that will travel, 9 will start, we'll have 3 weekend starters, and but what's your role going to look like? Can you be a star? And that's a hard thing for kids, but I think as coaches, when I coached high school basketball, I had a kid that he couldn't shoot, couldn't dribble, but he set great screens. And literally, that was his one job. So we had certain set plays that when he would go in there, I knew he would set the tough screen to help our other guy get the shot off. And I would praise him in practice. I would tell him he was the best, screener in our program. And I highlighted him in our banquets. Right now, I could. No different than as coaches, our pinch runner, or that guy that does a left-on-left situation out of the bullpen. Whatever that is, you can create that in your environment to players. And then, again, the cream rises to the top. There's no doubt. But everyone can have a role, and I think that's kind of where we strive to try to really and get that to our players and help them understand that, hey, just because you're not playing, here's your role. Here's how it can look, and here's how you can get better. And I think and for those kids that want to come in and they want to leave after a year, I say, go ahead. This is not for you. That's fine. I've learned when I was younger, I learned a long time ago not to hold kids back. Now, my second year at University of Maine, I had a kid that was like Rookie of the Year, was awesome, and then all of a sudden he wanted to, not play baseball. And I fought it. Coach Meter at the time, he's like, Coach, just let him go, because he's not going to care about you. He's going to worry about himself more than you, so don't worry about him. And I know it's very not a great way to think about it, but it's true. If they don't want to be here, move on. And I don't care who you've been, who that person has ever been in my career. I've said, hey, I'll support you. I want what's best for you. I think that's kind of it's a balancing act you have to find as a head coach, but you have to have faith in what the kids you recruit initially, so that doesn't happen that often.
When you're going through the recruiting process, Edwin, you're recruiting a guy, you have him on campus, you like him, but maybe it's a walk-on, like low scholarship type of guy. Is there anything that a player has ever kind of said or done on his recruiting visit to make you think more of him, personality-wise, or anything else where maybe you make a better offer than you initially thought you would or were expecting to before he showed up that day?
There's moments where I've had players on visits, 100%, that, baseball-wise is this. But then maybe I saw how they interact with his mom, and just the interaction they had in a positive. And, I had one kid his mom was in a wheelchair, and how he interacted with her to make sure that she was taken care of, I was like, this kid's a superstar. And he was, and so like those type of moments are moments that you only can really see on the recruiting visit. And I think those type of things, just how they interact with people, how they are with, when they meet our players, the feedback I get from players, they're like, Coach, this guy's really about it. Like some kids, they're kind of like shy and whatnot, but some kids have personality, but those type of moments where it's like, and it's the other way too, is there's times where it's the opposite. where I'm sitting there telling a kid about the program, he's falling asleep, and I'm like, man, I don't know if this is going to work out, or like just not engaged. And I think those type of moments, one way or the other, at least for me in the 17 years I've been doing this, it's like you kind of know pretty quickly who's going to be about that, the genuine, things versus not. I think that kind of maps is easy to tell. But yeah, I've had a few of those for sure that have been pretty special, and they've ended up being A+ people. It never fails. So
kind of switch gears again on you one last time in the last handful of minutes that we've got here on the podcast. Between your playing career and your coaching career, you've been at quite a few levels. Well, a handful of levels of baseball.
Yeah.
And this may be a common question that you get, but what's the biggest difference that you have seen? Because even at the Division I level, you've been at two different Division I. Well, yeah, you've been at two different Division I levels. There's a difference between Power 5 baseball and mid-major Division I baseball. From all the way from Division III through Power 5, what's the biggest difference that you see as you go up levels?
Good question. I think the biggest change, my first job was I coached middle school basketball, but I also coached high school baseball before I started coaching college. I think the change is just simple. The numbers of the talented players and the mistakes there's more talented players, there's less mistakes being made in general. So, like, if you're a pitcher at Division III level, you can get away with certain things you may not be able to get away with at mid-major level, at the Division I level. And same thing as you get to the Power 5, the margin for error is very small. And I think that the same thing with the talented players. Like, your recruiting has to be, there's more room for error at Division III level because you got more window, right? Division I, mid-major, you have some window. You can have a couple of years to develop, but at the Power 5 level, you have a little bit more. You got to be really, really locked in on the kids you're bringing in and the type of people. And so I think those are the type of things that I think is the difference. And then obviously the depth. I think, there's Division III teams out there. There's a team out in Chapman this year. They had a fifth rounder and another guy signed him. That's like, so there's talented players all over the country, talented levels. I think the difference is, in general, you're going to have more depth and quality of depth at a higher level as you go up. Doesn't mean a junior college can't beat a Division II team or a Division II team can't beat a Division I team. But in general, that's kind of what you see at the most at the higher levels that I've been a part of.
What do you think is the most common misconception of Division I baseball, if there is one, just based on what you see, what you hear when you have kids visit or get kid in a program? What's the most common misconception about Division I baseball, if there is one?
I think the scholarships part. I think a lot of kids have no idea about the percentages. For the most part, even though they're getting recruited, but they hear 40% or 45%, and you're like, what does that mean? So I think that part of it, like in general, like the public. If I go to high schools, people think that you have to offer 95 miles an hour, and that's not realistic. I think between the scholarships and then just the outside people think that everyone at Division I is going to throw 90 miles an hour as a pitcher and hit a lot of home runs, and I think that's not realistic. But I think that the scholarship part would be the biggest misconception. Like, people think that everyone's on a full ride because of football and basketball, and so I think that part is always harder conversations to understand for people, and then to try to process like, hey, this is what it is. You're going to have to pay X amount of dollars to come play here. So I think that those would be the biggest ones that I would say.
Can you talk about the scholarship situation a little bit, and maybe we'll end it here? Just talk about how many scholarships you have to offer to how many kids, and maybe what Eastern Kentucky's plan is to break that up. Like, do you have we want to spend this much money or this many scholarships on pitchers, and same thing with catchers, or any? Do you mind talking about that a little bit, just to give people an idea?
Yeah, we're allowed 11. We have 11.7 scholarship is the most, total full scholarships you're able to have at Division I level. You can have 35 men on your roster, only 27 of them on scholarships. So you have basically 27 guys to break up 11.7 scholarships. So the minimum amount you can do is 25% of this total cost to go to school, whatever school you're at. So those are the biggest things you have to work with. I've been at places where we kind of have it based off so much money in pitching, so much money. I think for us, in every program I've been at, I think you have to do what's best for your program and find the best players you can. And that may be a shortstop. There might be a catcher. There might be a pitcher. I think I try not to get caught up into the dollar amount. I tell my recruiting coordinator, Julius McDougall, who's done a great job, he basically, it's a puzzle. It's your job to figure out the puzzle. We'll all help put it together, but you need to make sure that it works at the end of the day, that we're kind of on budget. So it's a challenge. There's no question. There's tough conversations. I think, with our situation at Eastern, we're pretty affordable for in-state and out-of-state, so we have some flexibility. I know some schools you have to go more in-state than out-of-state for us, all total dollar amount. So it's a challenge. It's a matrix, if you will. It makes it difficult because it's not just clear cut. Hey, here's a full ride. Like, that would be fun. Like, I don't know what that would be like. Hey, here's a full ride. You want to come play? Because then I think you have more parity. But the teams that are able to be creative with academic money, and then maybe other monies that may be out there, those are all things that are important to understand. But the scholarship piece in itself is definitely a challenge.
No question about it. And other levels have the same types of challenges. And another thing that people don't get is that not all Division I schools are fully funded, meaning not all Division I schools have that 11.7 scholarships, just like not all Division IIs have 9 scholarships. Just like at junior college, there's a big variance between what people, what schools can offer and what they actually have. And that's for sure a big thing that I wish that, more parents and kids were aware of before they got into the recruiting process, just to be prepared. You get offered 40% as a freshman. Like, that's not a bad offer, but some people come out of there probably shaking their heads like, what in the world?
Right. Yeah.
Well, Edwin, this has been great. This is Edwin Thompson, everybody. He's the head coach at Eastern Kentucky. I've really appreciated all the time and everything that you've shared with us today. I think you've got a great perspective and a very mature coach, and just someone who I just appreciate the kind of the work and the effort and the path that you've taken. I think is the path less traveled for sure. There aren't a lot of coaches who can say that they have done something like you have done, and to elevated themselves to being a Division I head coach, and it's been great, everything that you've shared, and I very much appreciate you being a guest on the podcast.
Well, thanks, Jeff, for all you do, and like I said, any coach out there that starting off and coaching middle school basketball or high school baseball or travel ball that wants to be a Division I coach, call me, email me. I'll tell you the path. It's like Jeff said, not easy, but it's definitely one that if you stick to it, you're professional, you're hardworking, and you're a good person, you have a good skill set, things got to take care of themselves. So I've been very fortunate. I have some great people give me great opportunities. As I said earlier, my mentors that I've had in my life, and I've got great coaches and great players. So it makes my job a lot of fun every day to come to the ballpark. So thanks for all you do for spreading the word of baseball.
Yes, sir. And I appreciate all your time, and best of luck to you and the team.
Same to you.